Babe, what's love got to do with it? Got to do with
Let's get into that. Hey, I'm Andrea Warnock.
I'm Nathan Warnock.
And you've joined us for Marriage Monday on the Marriage by Design podcast. Marriage Monday is a time where we talk about what God's design for marriage is according to the Bible and just some practical things that we go through as well and marriage topics.
That's right. So this month we are talking about love and respect. Our conversation kind of is based on a book by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs where he talks about the concept of love and respect. And it's based on Ephesians 5:33, where Paul commands husbands, love your wives, and likewise wives, respect your husbands. And so Dr. Eggerichs started asking the question, well, what a curious thing. Why didn't he just say husbands and wives love each other? But he doesn't. He commands husbands to love wives, wives to respect husbands. And it began him down a trail of really unlocking that women are created by nature with a desire for love. Men are created, likewise, by nature with a desire for respect. So it's natural for me to respect Andrea, but that's not what Andrea needs. She needs love. Likewise, it's natural for her to love me, but that's not what I need. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy being loved and she doesn't enjoy being respected. Of course, as human beings, we both love those things. But men have a natural heart desire to be respected, and women likewise to be loved. So last week we talked about the crazy cycle, which is what happens when this whole thing gets off, right? And really the idea is that when a woman feels unloved, she reacts with disrespect, and then the man, because he feels disrespected, reacts in an unloving way, and it spins up this cycle of craziness. And you may be on that cycle right now. Certainly we've been on it from time to time, sometimes for short periods of time, sometimes for long periods of time. But today, we're going to dig into the love piece of that. What is it about Andrea that so desires and cherishes being loved? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, babe, in the book, Love and Respect, he sets up this metaphor for women where he refers to women as having a love tank, right, with a hose that's attached to it, and how I respond to you depends on what goes into or comes out of that hose that's connected to your love tank. He also talks about pink earphones and a pink megaphone. So maybe talk a little bit about what he talks about as far as what those things are, right?
Sure.
But then also what that looks like for you.
Sure. So the air hose idea is that I have an air hose that's kind of my lifeline that needs to be filled with love by Nathan. So then if I have this air hose that's really my lifeline, when Nathan comes in and is unloving, it kind of like stomps on my air hose and puts a kink in it. And so if you have an air hose that you're getting your life from, what are you going to do if there's a kink in that and you're not getting what you need to live? I mean, think about it as far as oxygen. You've got, you're on a ventilator or whatever, and you get a kink in that. Probably a lot of struggling and starting maybe to flail. And when my air hose gets kinked by feeling like I'm being unloved by Nathan, or he does some there's some unloving acts here and there that maybe put some holes in that, I'm going to flail in disrespect. I'm probably going to try to get that love that I need, get that life that I need in order to survive. So that can look like trying to start controlling things. That can look like a lot of disrespect then on my part towards Nathan because I'm so mad that he's kinking my hose. So that's kind of the air hose part. And if we're not getting that for women, if we're not getting that love that's kind of our lifeline to our marriage, then we can feel like we're being deprived of what we need, and then the struggle for getting what we need begins.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good analogy.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the pink headphones and the pink megaphone.
Yeah, so this is kind of a funny one. The way we hear and speak is through, Dr. Eggerichs says, through like a pink megaphone and pink headphones. The way men hear, though, is through blue headphones and speak through a blue megaphone.
Right.
So an example that he gives, which is a really great example, is a woman says, I have nothing to wear. She walks into her closet and she says, I have nothing to wear. What is she saying? Ladies, I'm sure you all get it. I have nothing that I want to wear. I have nothing that I feel I look good in. She's not saying I have no clothes. And probably every woman listening to this knows what she's saying. I have nothing that I want to wear. But what the guy hears her saying is what she actually said. I have nothing to wear. And he's hearing it as, I have nothing to wear. He's like, yes, you do. Look at all these clothes. You've got clothes to wear, woman.
He should be like, fine, wear nothing.
Yes, right. So that's such a great example of what women say is in what men hear. And then it happens vice versa too. Mm-hmm. With what a man speaks is totally can come to a totally different meaning for a woman. That's the way she hears it or interprets it.
That's right.
So the problem happens then when there's that misinterpretation of what was said or heard.
Yeah. And
then that can kind of launch you onto that crazy cycle because of the misinterpretation.
Right. So this is probably a good time maybe to talk just a minute about communication. So we were taught a long time ago a tool about when you have a conversation to try and avoid those pink-blue moments where you say something, or let's say I say something, and then you respond by saying...
What I heard you say is...
Right, exactly right. Yeah, and...
So for that conversation to be like, I have nothing to wear, and what you would say is...
What I hear you saying is, you don't have any clothes.
And what I would say is... No, what I mean is there's nothing in my closet I want to wear.
Right, and then I'll react with disappointment.
Yes, you would.
Right, so, but that may sound formulaic, right? And we kind of like to think, well, I want my relationship to always be spontaneous and not formulaic. But sometimes being formulaic can help us to avoid getting on the crazy cycle.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about like every conversation that you have, but when it's getting to be maybe a little bit heated moment.
Especially if you feel like my wife or my husband just said something, harsh or out of character. Mm-hmm. Right? In those moments, I think it's important to stop and say, what I hear you saying is, and then say it and see what they respond with, right? If you feel like it's out of character, then it probably is. It's probably a misunderstanding.
Right.
Right, and then it gives them, rather than assuming the worst, right, it gives them an opportunity to say, oh my gosh, that's not at all what I meant, and try to have a conversation and avoid getting in the crazy cycle that way.
Yep.
It's great. So how does your pink headphones and your pink megaphone interfere with unity in our marriage?
I find... It interferes when I'm assuming. So I assume things that were never intended. So that can come out as, and we kind of talked about that a little bit last week. Like a lot of that is in our. Right. A lot of the issues that we can have are really in our minds.
Yeah.
And so So I may be assuming that you are not loving me well and that that's your intention. When in reality, if I were to say, this is how I'm feeling, you're acting, this is how I'm feeling with what you mean. This is how I feel about what you mean or what you're saying. I think you mean this. And then he would have the opportunity to either say yes or more than likely say no, not at all. But I am a different person than Nathan, and I'm a different gender than Nathan.
Yeah.
So a lot of things that I interpret or maybe I infer are not right. And so then holding on to those and assuming is the wrong thing because I don't give him the opportunity to really say the truth of the matter.
Yeah, so that the assuming thing, that is, I mean, that's both ways, right? And I think a lot of us, that's kind of why that conversational what I hear you saying is important,
right?
Because it tries to help avoid that. So I also want to ask you a question, kind of the flip side of that, because it's important that Andrea hears things with pink earphones and speaks with a pink megaphone, and it's important that I hear with blue headphones and speak with a blue megaphone. Dr. Eggerichs says quite frequently a saying that we say quite a bit in our home, which is not wrong, just different. And so often we can think if something's different, it's wrong. You know what? That we see, particularly in today's society, when we take that to an extreme, what you get is racism, bigotry, sexism, all of those kinds of things that are being thrown around right now, right? Because true racists and bigots get to a point where, hey, if something's different than I am, it's wrong. Right? And it's important for us, first and foremost within our marriage and family, and certainly in our communities and those around us, to recognize not wrong, just different.
And there are so many things like that.
That's right. So the question I want to ask you, babe, is as you think about your pink headphones and your pink megaphone, what is it about that you think really enhances our marriage and enhances our family? Right? So you said the pinkness can sometimes make you assume things because you're hearing them a certain way and your brain's interpreting them a certain way.
Right.
But what would you say about that makes that is really valuable to our family?
Good question. Sometimes that can definitely come in with raising children and giving you a different perspective.
Yep.
I think that when we're trying to understand the other person's, so when you're trying to understand my pinkness and I'm trying to understand your blueness, it really brings a new level of intimacy.
Yeah, it does.
And I don't mean like sexual intimacy. I mean intimacy in our relationship, because there's just that deeper level of understanding.
Yep.
And maybe my understanding may not be agreement, but it's understanding.
Right.
And while no one needs to be validated in order to be right, it's sort of a validation sometimes of, oh, I understand what you're saying. I don't agree, but I get what you're saying. And so, yeah, it's kind of taking the time to have that interpretation, that's needed. Right.
Yeah, that reminds me, one of the kind of staple verses of marriage for me is 1 Peter 3:7, and the first part of it says, live with your husbands, live with your wives with understanding. And that word understanding implies that you are a student of your spouse. And I think that what you just described really is that.
Right.
I can, if I could share about your pinkness, one thing that I think really complements my blueness in our marriage is I can definitely be cavemanish with regards to I get something on my mind and I'm going, right? And we're going and I've got to focus on this thing and we're doing it. And you're really good because you not only hear me through those pink headphones, but you hear our family through them and other people around us, that you're good at picking out like, hey, I really think Ryan needs some time with you. Or, I really think you and Jackson should stay up and play a game together. Or you're much more in tune with our family dynamics than I can be sometimes. And I really feel like that's the first thing that jumps out when I think about pinkness versus blueness in our marriage that you're much better at than me. And I think it's because of the way you hear and see the world around you.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so how do you grow in your understanding of my blueness?
Yeah.
Meaning, it's easy, again, to just go, well, he's different, she's wrong. Right? How have you tried to grow in relating to me as a blue guy?
Well, a lot of that is what you said, living with understanding, live with understanding, be a student of your spouse. And being a student takes intentionality.
Yeah.
So I need to intentionally try to understand what he's saying and thinking and believing. And what was the question again?
What are some ways you've grown in your understanding? Like either things you did to try and grow in that, or so you said being a student. That's
praying is always my answer for everything.
God.
But I know it seems like such a oh my gosh, it's always your answer. But God created Nathan, so he's the best source of knowledge about who Nathan is. So those times where I'm like, I do not get this about him, or I'm not understanding this about him, or whatever. If go to the creator of that person, and the wisdom that I gain from that is amazing. So yes, pray sounds so cliche, but it's because that's what we should be doing, and because it works. But having an attitude of prayer and an attitude of trying to understand and appreciating too that he is different than me and he was created. I think that appreciation changes things so much, because I'm not trying to control him into what I am or what I think he should be, but rather appreciating the difference that God made him and how God's created him to speak and hear so differently than me, because it's important. God made him that way because there's a need for that, and appreciating that need, and rather than feeling like it needs to be in competition with me, rather than feeling that way, feeling like it's coming to an understanding that it's really a compliment to who I am is a great thing, and for me that starts a lot of times with gratitude and a heart of thanksgiving. So I think those are some ways.
That's good. Ben. Okay, then I think the last kind of thing for us to talk about before we close the book on this episode is, in what ways can I minister to you, right, in a way that builds up your love tank? And I'm happy for you to use me specifically, or just in general, maybe some examples of other women that you've had an opportunity to minister to, and just kind of lay out some ways for guys that are catching this episode, some things they could even do even today, to sow into their lives.
I think any act of love is good. Go back to those dating days and think about what you did to try to woo her during those dating days, writing notes and putting them on the windshield, or planning those spontaneous to her dates, surprising me. Those are all things that I love when you take the time to do those sorts of things. When you tell me why you love me, makes me feel loved. To hear I love you after 15 years of marriage is great, but to hear why you love me is like top of the mountain great. And then if you've never heard of the 5 love languages, read that book or find some information about it, because when you choose to really pour into those top love languages of mine, then I feel loved, and it's not like I feel this gushy love. I just feel like you are intending to love me well, and that makes me feel loved. Like you thought of me and you had to put work into that, and it's not this gushy I melt, but it's this I feel so important, and I feel like I matter.
Do you find in those times when your love tank is full that it's easier to react in a way that's respectful? And do you feel like
sure, yes, yeah. So if you think of kind of a love tank as a bank account, when it's got more in it and money is spent, the currency is spent, you have those times where, so if my love tank is full, but I have those times where you've reacted in an unloving way or whatever, yeah, it's definitely easier to kind of write those off and not allow those to set in as bitterness or allow those to really affect me, because there's a buffer there.
Sure.
But when it's getting razor thin, and there's those times, and then you do something that's unloving, then that it is really hard to not react in a disrespectful way, and I frequently fail at that.
So really that's part of the importance, husbands, for really loving on your wives, is because that is a way we can minister to them in a way that really matters with regards to making the other parts of their lives easier. Parenting, those kinds of things. I mean, our oldest son is not amazing at sewing into your love tank. A lot of times he says things where I hear him and I'm like, dude, some girl's gonna punch you in the face someday if you treat her like that. But I have found that when you and I are jiving and feeling close, it's still hurtful, but it seems like it's easier for you to be like, okay, he's 10 and stupid. It's fine. And when we're not, it seems like it's more hurtful, right? So I think, guys, for you, particularly if you have children, really sewing into loving on your wife is so meaningful. And the 5 love languages is great for that, by Dr. Gary Chapman. So pick that up or hang around, because we're going to do a month on that.
Yeah. And there's a Bible verse, and I don't know where it is, but it says love covers a multitude of sins. And it's true. When you're loved well, for women, and there's something that goes awry, that love covers that.
That's good. Anything else, babe, on your pinkness that you think couples should know?
No. I think just be grateful that you're different.
Right. Not wrong.
Right. Just different. Yeah.
That's great. Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. We will be back next week, and we're going to talk about respect. Until then, tomorrow on Wednesday, we've got Testosterone Tuesday, Women Power Wednesday. We're going to continue our series talking about affairs. Then we've got Thirsty Thursday and Family Friday coming at you. Family Friday, we'll be talking about the 6 to 12 5-year-old range, and we were talking about Jackson, who we were just talking about a moment ago. So until then, guys, thanks so much for joining us. You have yourselves a great week.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.